Hello and welcome to another video on the JJ Think Tank. Nighttime session this evening, and I want to dedicate this video to the topic of identity, change, and the Ship of Theseus, or Theseus, depending on how we pronounce it. And its relationship to our personal identity, yes? Because I don't know about you, but over time my personal identity has changed. It's still changing now, and this paradox of the Ship of Theseus is relevant in explaining the the difficulties of defining who we are, yes, and it questions our presuppositions regarding our personal identity. So this Greek paradox, this famous Greek paradox, is about a ship whose parts, timbers, so the wooden parts of the ship, where they get slowly replaced over time until the ship becomes a totally new one. And then we ask the question, is it still the same ship after this change, after all these changes have taken place? Or perhaps it's still the same ship, yes? Or even, at what point, can we say if at all, if it is a new ship? And this is the same with our personal identity. So our cells get changed every 30 days or so. New cells appear, old ones die. So on a biological level, we are constantly changing. But then also on a cultural level, and when defining our identity, this also changes. And this is relevant in our current times, yes? Times of rampant globalization, rampant change, because we are constantly exposed to new cultures, both online and in the real world as well, especially if you live in big mega cities where there are people from various backgrounds. And from my experience, I've observed my change in identity, my change in political views, in my political standpoints, and this, the paradox that I mentioned before, kind of helped me to accept this, yes, and to not really define myself specifically, and give myself some leeway, yes? So a bit about myself now. So I was born in London, the UK, to Polish parents. When I was younger, I never really thought about my identity. I was simply going through the motions, enjoying my life as a child, as a teenager. But of course, as I was growing up, I received my fair share of parental, I like to call it parental programming. But I wouldn't classify this in a negative way. It's just what my parents passed on to me based on their experience. And I guess subconsciously I took this in on one level, but I also really was immature, right? I didn't really think about politics, about personal identity, about these issues really. And it was only after I turned perhaps after I reached the age of 20 or so that I started to think about these topics, these issues. I started to become more interested in my ethnic background, so in my Polish identity, but also my British and English identity. Although I am not ethnically English or British, having been brought up in the country, in England, London specifically, I have picked up by default the cultural norms, a set of behaviours, a set of values that Britain represents. Yes. So now I guess there's one example that I'd like to share, which kind of expresses what I'm trying to get at, which is the anti-Soviet and Russian attitudes, yes, of my parents, and they were of course justified because this regime, Soviet regime, was a sick one both for Polish citizens and for the average Russian citizen. And as a child, as a teenager, I acknowledged all of this. And nodded, minded my own business. At the time, I was probably thinking about some computer game or a sport, something like this. So I just sucked all of this information in, and initially, this guided my worldview. Yes, not my worldview, but my political stance, we could say. Yes. But now, having grown up and matured, I have my own views on this particular issue, for example, agreeing on many levels, but also having my own perspective. Yes, and this we can apply this thought of mine to many different issues. Yes, and again, it emphasizes how we should not put ourselves into a box, label ourselves, define ourselves. We should be not patient, but we should be methodical in our thinking in order to reach a view that is more true to ourselves, yes, and our generation, because we are always part of a new generation. Every generation has its own experiences, its own troubles, and these shape, yes, our worldview. So now, for instance, if I were to state my views on the Soviet Union and Russia, I don't really have this Russophobic attitude, and I have quite often on Twitter a lot of confrontations, yes, with Polish people on there. They're quite Russophobic, yes, and I guess this is, due to background. Yes, the background of these individuals. They were born in Poland. They were maybe part of an education system that reminds them of the dangers of Russian imperialism, which of course is true to a degree, but also I think this attitude is based on a collective trauma that is kind of out of date now, really, and it could lead to negative consequences for both of our countries. And I'm happy because a lot of Polish people agree with me. They see the same issue, and there is a lot of hope that finally this tragic, traumatic aspect of Polish history can finally be overcome, because many times in the past, Poland and Polish people were really used, I think, used and abused in various uprisings against Russian imperialism that were not in our interests, really. They didn't aid the Polish cause, they aided the cause of other Western powers. It's my view, my interpretation of history, yes? So yeah, this is just one topic, we could say, yes? But now I want to branch out a bit further, talk about in more general terms, and discuss identity. Yes, so on one level, identity it's genetic, of course. I would agree. If you are part of a nation, you have some genes that reflect this. But also on another level, it is cultural. Yes, and so this is the second level, I would say. The basic level is genetic, the second is cultural, and the third, I would say, is kind of is eternally self-generated. So as we grow up, as we think, we constantly question our views, we update our worldview based on new information, based on what we read, and so forth, yes? So if you were to take my example, yes, so genetically I am by and large Polish, yes, and since I speak and use the language on a daily basis, I feel doubly some affiliation to the country, yes. Yet over my course, over the course of my life, I haven't spent many years there. As a child and as a teenager, I remember fondly my holidays there. So I went on long holidays to Poland in the countryside, and I have this kind of nostalgic feeling, yes, about the country and about the village, the landscape of the village, hearing the cows in the morning, and the chickens, making their sounds, so forth, yes. But of course, most of the time in my life have been spent in England, yes. So culturally and behaviourally, perhaps more British or English, we could say. And having, after analysing my personality, my behaviour, I think this is definitely true to some degree. I spent a lot of time in London, but also around 5 years in Liverpool. And Liverpool is a city that I really love. It is a great place. It's where I studied, and there's specific charm about the city, an Irish charm, we could say, and also, of course, Liverpool Football Club. It's a club that I love and that I still support. Although I don't watch football, I don't watch football games, but I watch the highlights of Liverpool football games still, just to keep up with what's going on. Yes. So if someone were to ask me to state directly which country I feel more at home in, at this moment in time, I would struggle to give my interrogator a definitive answer. In between, I guess, would be the best answer I could give. I like to. Well, now I guess I feel quite comfortable in Poland. After all, as I said, I speak the language, so this helps a lot. There's a lot of hype now about Poland. People are saying that the country is on the rise. I would agree in some way. I think some of these economic statistics are a bit manipulated. I don't know what this growth is based on really. Is it based on empty money, or is it actually based on growth in productivity and in the growth of key industries such as production of materials or production of high-end goods and services. I don't know. I'm not an economist, so I can't really judge. Yes. So. Yeah. So now I want to go back to the third level. Yes. So I just discussed the two levels. Yes, there's the genetic level and the cultural level. But then there's the third level that is eternally self-generated, and I guess we could equate this to our soul, not our soul, but kind of our deeper selves, which is perhaps above nationality in general. It's the most human part of ourselves, yes. And here, the Ship of Theseus, this Greek paradox, is relevant because this is the part of our identity that constantly changes. Yes. But yes, here I want to read part of my article that discusses this self-generative identity. And this self-generative identity, I would say, is more global in nature, and it reflects our true humanity. We see the human in the other, yes, despite all the differences, despite all the the cultural differences, the differences in language, and so forth, yes. And this self-generative identity, it's especially now with postmodernity and globalization, it's impacted much more easily because we have access to technology, and we have podcasts, American podcasts we can listen to, Polish podcasts we can listen to, British ones, European ones, Arabic people speaking in English. Yes, so it's kind of we've been bombarded. Yes, and this kind of creates a chaos in our identity. Our ethical stance, our views, our political views, they constantly change because we see so many and hear so many different perspectives, and therefore it's foolish to define yourself and to put yourself into a trap. Yes, because you could make a fool of out of yourself. And on a more obvious level, these these interactions with the online world and with people from other backgrounds can reassess our stereotypes and preconceived notions of other nations, peoples, and cultures. Yes, and therefore our shared humanity can come to the fore. This is kind of my experience so far, really. And it has led me to change my views in some way. Yes, so when I was younger, definitely in my early 20s, I was far right. Yes, on one level, I would still consider myself to share the views of quote unquote far right. Yes, I think the ethnic and demographic nature of the European peoples has to be preserved, because whether we like it or not, demographics is destiny, and you have to protect the demographic nature, yes, of your country, because if it sways too much to one side, then it can be dangerous. Yes, it can be dangerous for your people. Yes, but then at the same time, as I've grown older, I understand the liberal standpoint as well. I kind of appreciate what they are saying. I listen to them as well, and sometimes they force me to change some views of mine. So I think that is all really for today. I don't think I want to say anything more. Of course, this article is linked to many other kind of topics and ideas. I could expand on this. So especially here, when I talked about postmodernity, globalization, and ethics, I wrote an article about this using the work of Zygmunt Bauman. So he was an interesting sociologist who analyzed the processes of postmodernity and how they cause this ambivalence. Yes, and he had a lot of interesting things to say, and perhaps I will create a video about his views in the near future. But yes, this is everything for today. I'll end with this quote by Ernest Gellner. So he was a famous theory of nationalism, and he wrote this down. Nationalism is not the awakening of nations to self-consciousness. It invents nations where they do not exist. And looking back at history, that's true, because before the First World War we had empires, right? We had the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we had the Ottoman Empire, the Russian Empire, the German Empire, perhaps the German Empire as well. I don't know. Sometimes about my facts, I'm not too great. But then after these empires collapsed, new countries popped up. Yes, and this is true when we look at, for example, Czechoslovakia. Yes, before it was Czechoslovakia, now it's Czech Republic, Slovakia. Yes, or we look at the Ottoman Empire now. Now that it's gone, we got Turkey. So who knows what will happen? Yes, perhaps in the near future, a new nation will arise in our region. So, with this theory of the multipolar world, large blocks will form, and therefore new nations will need to appear that integrate various ethnicities. So, referring to the region I'm living in now in Poland, we've got a lot of Ukrainians, more Belarusians. We've got, obviously, the Czech Republic, Slovakia beneath Poland to the south. We've got Hungary. Perhaps out of some of these regions, a bigger nation will appear. This is just speculation, but the same could be said for France. Yes, France is changing a lot, and either it will remain traditionally French, or it will change. Yes, because the French relationship to Islam is a bit strange. It's different, and it's not exactly as Alain de Benoit. He was he still lives now, but he said that, and he views Islam to perhaps be also a positive force for France. That's another topic. I won't go into it now. But yes, so that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it maybe made you question your identity to some degree. Perhaps it shed some light on what identity is. And yes, I'll see you on the next one. Thank you for listening.